Back segment tonight, the first appearance of former Vice President Dick Cheney in the No Spin Zone. We'll have two segments with Mr. Cheney this evening. Second one will deal with his new book called Heart, an American Medical Odyssey, about his stunning recovery from a heart transplant and heart disease. But our first segment deals with Iraq and Afghanistan. Some facts. Iraq, Americans killed in that country, more than 4,000, wounded more than 30,000. The Iraq War, which lasted 8.5 years, cost nearly $1 trillion. Afghanistan, Americans KIA, 1,782. U.S. troops wounded close to 20,000. Cost of the war about $750 of $1 trillion so far. It is expected most U.S. forces will be out of Afghanistan by the end of 2014. Here now, one of the chief architects of the Iraq and Afghanistan campaigns, Dick Cheney. Let's take Iraq first.
Bill?
Big trouble there now?
Yes, there is, unfortunately, and I'm very concerned about it. What I see is that it would appear the level of violence has escalated significantly. The surge that President Bush put in place in 07 and 08 was very successful, reducing the overall level of violence, getting the Sunnis to buy in, and the reawakening, if you will, out in Al Anbar province. But there was never the follow-on agreement negotiated, which was always the intent and which we thought we had set up at the end, but the Obama administration didn't pursue it.
And they didn't pursue it because the Iraq authorities wouldn't identify Americans. They wouldn't give them... They wanted to try them themselves if any misbehavior or any accusations. I think that's what the deal fell apart over.
Well, but we have that debate in every country where we've negotiated those agreements, and we've got them all over the world. It's always a question of sovereignty. We always insist on retaining jurisdiction over our people.
Absolutely, as we should, right.
As we should, and that's exactly what we did in this case. It takes some persistence. You've got to stick with it, but they never stuck with it. They just walked away from it.
All right, so you feel that they could have gotten a deal about the indemnification?
I believe indeed they could have, and the stay-behind force isn't a combat force, similar to what we had there before, but it's there for training. It's there to provide capability they don't have, logistics, intelligence, medical, and air
So you
support.
think the Obama administration just wanted out of there and the hell with it?
Exactly, and we're paying the price now. The Iraqis are paying the price now.
What did we get out of Iraq, though? I mean, as Americans, we're all in it together. We're all in it together. It's easy to finger point. They finger pointed you and Bush, and I don't want to do that. But we spent $1 trillion on this with a lot of pain and suffering on the American military. What did we get out of it?
Well,
beside Saddam being out of there, what?
But remember what we were faced with in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. We had a lot of evidence to indicate that, in fact, al-Qaeda was trying to get their hands on weapons of mass destruction. We had in Saddam Hussein a guy who had produced and used weapons of mass destruction.
Okay, all of that, and I supported it. And I don't blame you, Vice President Cheney or President Bush, for doing what you did. I mean, I'm not back Monday morning quarterbacking. But what right now? What do we get out of Iraq for all that blood and treasure? What do we get out of it?
What we gained, and my concern was then, and it remains today, is that the biggest threat we face is the possibility of terrorist groups like al-Qaeda equipped with weapons of mass destruction, with nukes, bugs, or gas. That was the threat after 9/11, and when we took down Saddam Hussein, we eliminated Iraq as a potential source of that.
Al-Qaeda in Mesopotamia is back?
That's right, but they wouldn't be if they'd followed our policies that we laid out for them when we left.
Okay.
But also, let me finish.
Sure.
In terms of what we got out of it, we took down Saddam as a major source. 5 days after we got Saddam, Muammar Gaddafi announced he was going to surrender his nuclear materials, and he had centrifuges, he had a weapons design, he had the uranium feedstock, and after we took care of that, we took down A.Q. Khan, who was his major supplier. The father of the Pakistan program, it was running a black market operation. We've put him out of business. We got rid of 3 major sources of potential proliferation of nuclear weapons. Very important.
Okay. But right now, Iraq looks to me, and this is the headline in Washington Post today, nearly 2 years after the U.S. troop withdrawal, Iraq's in the midst of a deepening security crisis as an al-Qaeda affiliate wages a relentless campaign of attacks. So while you're correct in the bigger picture, I don't know if the suffering and blood was worth it.
Well, we've got a major problem in that part of the world. It's not just Iraq. It's also danger in Afghanistan.
And let's get to Afghanistan.
And in Iran. The withdrawal of the United States from that part of the world has significantly diminished our capacity to influence those events.
In Afghanistan, you have a corrupt leader, Karzai. Would you accede that? Corrupt?
Corrupt, I suppose, is in the eye of the beholder in Afghanistan.
In your eye, though?
No, in Afghanistan, nearly everybody's got.
But in your eye, Karzai corrupt?
In my eye, Karzai was a guy who was there when we needed him. And
All right.
who in
But
the
he's
early
corrupt.
years,
I understand you got to deal with bad guys sometimes.
I don't want to pass judgment and say he's corrupt.
Is it okay if I do?
You can if you can.
All right.
Sure.
And you're not going to really come after me if I say that, are you?
Well,
okay.
I will. I'll give you a pass.
Now, it looks to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that once the United States pulls most of our people out, and we may pull them all out just like we did in Iraq, because Karzai is not cooperating on a lot of different fronts, the Taliban, with al-Qaeda's help, going to come in and make that country a chaotic mess.
Yeah. Not just Afghanistan. Issue of The Economist 2 or 3 weeks ago had a cover on it that said the new face of terrorism. And inside it showed a map of 10 different countries across North Africa, from Mali, Nigeria, all the way across,
right,
that are now safe havens or sanctuaries, if you will, places where terrorists, Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda fellow travelers can find safe harbor and sanctuary. Far bigger part of the globe now that's vulnerable to that kind of thing, training facilities and so forth, than we ever faced in the past. The U.S. withdrawal from that part of the world is significantly diminished our capacity, so that whether we're trying to deal with the situation in Syria or the situation in Iran, they don't pay any attention anymore.
Okay, so again, you have a policy difference with the Obama administration, that you wouldn't withdraw, you'd stay. But by staying, we are paying so much money, and the suffering on our military people is so high. But again, we're all Americans, we're all in this together. It looks to me like the Taliban is going to reconstitute and cause so much trouble in Afghanistan, it's going to become a chaotic mess.
But the last time the Taliban took control in Afghanistan, they had bases that trained 20,000 terrorists.
And I think they're going to do that again. Don't you think they're going to do that again?
In addition to 19 hijackers who came here with airline tickets and box cutters and killed 3,000 Americans.
I got it. But aren't they going to do that again?
So what? We just sit back and don't worry about it?
No, but I'm asking you, if we're withdrawing and they're going to do it again, as it seems likely they will.
Very real danger of that.
What do we get out of it?
Very well, what do you get out of it if you withdraw and you let that happen again, Bill? We don't have the choice anymore, if we ever did, since certainly since 9/11, of calling back behind our oceans and saying, well, what goes over there doesn't matter to us. It matters a hell of a lot if there are a lot of terrorist bases, and there are more areas where they can be based than ever before, and if there's major proliferation problem of nuclear weapons, and that also is increased.
But that puts the strain on our U.S. military is unbelievable.
Well,
and on our Treasury. 17 trillion in debt.
That's right. But if we had a presence over there, if we'd been able to continue the policies that we put in place, if we'd been able to work to keep governments, established governments that are stable, willing to defend their own sovereign turf, we'd be much better off than we are. Now we're in a position where our adversaries no longer fear us and our allies no longer trust us.
Final question then, real quick, and then we'll get to your book. You're not optimistic that Afghanistan is going to be able to fight its own battles?
I hope they will be able to, but I don't think they will unless there's a small group of Americans there to train and so forth. And Pakistan's next door. Where did we launch from to get Osama bin Laden? From Afghanistan.
Right.
Where do we base ourselves out of in terms of keeping track of what's going on in Pakistan?
But you got the drones now that may be able to inhibit them a little bit.
Based in Afghanistan.
Right. All right, we're going to have more with the Vice President in a moment. We'll talk about his stunning recovery from heart disease. You can see how feisty he is. Former Vice President Dick Cheney, author of the new book, Heart, An American Medical Odyssey. So most people don't have the intense heart issues you had. What are they going to take from this book?
Well, what we tried to do is talk about that story of the last 35 or 40 years when developments in the medical world have reduced the incidence of death from heart disease by some 50 or 60%. Most of the things that saved my life hadn't been invented when I had that first heart attack in 1978.
So you had 5 heart attacks.
5 heart attacks, 1 episode of sudden cardiac arrest, aneurysms in my knees, stents in my heart, implantable defibrillator.
And a heart transplant at the end, 2012.
Bottom line, Cleveland Clinic was having a conference on innovation in cardiology a couple of years ago. They invited me to come as a patient because I was the guy who had virtually everything done to him as a heart patient.
Okay. When these things happened to you, were you afraid?
First time around, the first heart attack I was. In terms of, you wake up, you're 37 years old, you're in the hospital, you've had a heart attack. That's sharp. It's disturbing, if you will. Over time, you learn to live with it. It's now to the point where, and the book in part is about this, it's hopeful. You can have coronary artery disease, heart disease, and lead a relatively normal life. I certainly did.
When you got the heart transplant, Were you fearful when you went in for that operation? That's a.
No, I was hopeful. I was
You were hopeful.
optimistic. you know.
Okay.
The hard part was the operation before that.
Do you fear death?
Do I fear death? I didn't feel that way when I faced it, when I got to the point where I was near death, I guess. I was talk about it in the book. When I went into end-stage heart failure, my heart is so weak it's no longer providing blood supply to kidneys, liver, and so forth. Had hours to go. I was at peace.
Are you a believer?
I am.
So you were at peace, and you did you put your hands in God, or how did you look at that?
It was a matter that I had thought for a long time that eventually the technology in my time would run out, and after a long and productive life, I'd reached the end of my days.
And you accepted that?
And I accepted that.
Okay, so that is a big component, I believe, of healing when you're not. Your mind isn't fighting your body, that
Right.
whatever happens, you're okay with it. Do you get into that at all in the book?
I describe going through that process. I describe talking to my family about the fact, about what I wanted to have done in terms of final arrangements.
The heart transplant person who donated it, do you want to say who that person is?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know?
No.
Interestingly enough,
Yeah.
huh?
They don't tell you. There's a process you can go through a third party, and if both the donor's family and the recipient want to make a connection, there's a way to do that. But they don't encourage it up front. When I came out from under the anesthetic after the transplant, I was joyous. The family of the donor has just been through a terrible tragedy. They've just lost somebody.
Yeah.
And so the match at that point is radically different. I've never done anything other than praise the donor every chance I get and encourage people to be donors, but I don't know details about my donor.
You know, I've followed you for many years, and you look very good in person. I mean, I'm talking to the Vice President. He's 2 inches away from me. I mean, you look robust. You
Right.
look healthy. And I believe it is a miracle that these kinds of things can happen. When you look 100 years ago, I mean, you're in the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even close. Do you believe that you're here for a purpose? Do you believe that all of these things that you've been through leads somewhere?
I can't say that, Bill. I am grateful for the prayers offered by a lot of people, for my family that stood by me through some very tough and difficult days, for a donor, for the wonders of modern American health care. But I can't say it would be an ego trip of some kind, I think, for me to say, well, I'm here for a purpose. God means for me to do something. So
Right.
I can't say that.
Are you done as far as public service is concerned?
I believe so.
Because President Bush told me that he doesn't want to get involved anymore or speak out even.
Yeah.
You do speak out.
I do. I have strong feelings, and I think it's helpful and useful for me. It makes me feel better occasionally to say what I think about what's going on.
You and the President were demonized by the national media pretty intensely, would you say?
Pretty intensely. I didn't expect anything else.
Do you think that that the Republican Party will eventually embrace you and bring you back as somebody who was right or point to you? Are you looking for that kind of redemption?
No, I'm not. I run into people all the time who say thank you.
Yeah.
I suppose my critics aren't the ones that come up and shake my hand and thank me for my service. But I'm very delighted that I had the opportunity to serve. I enjoyed it. I'd do it again in a minute.
Last question. Is the American press corrupt in your opinion?
Seriously misguided. There are some elements out there like Fox, like your show, that I think are seriously objective and reflective of what I think a lot of Americans believe. I do find that the mainstream media oftentimes is what I'd consider off base or has a bias.
Is there a reason?
I don't know that there's a reason, there's some kind of conspiracy. I don't believe that necessarily. I think there are, though, large parts of our society, including to some extent our educational system, our colleges and universities, the mainstream media, Hollywood, that do in fact have a significant bias towards the left. And
Yeah.
I think they've accumulated over time a lot of influence in areas that
Yeah,
are
because
important.
we're a changing country.
We are.
All right, Mr. Vice President, pleasure to have you in here, and I hope you come back.
I will. It's good to
Thank
be with you, Bill.
Okay. Plenty more. It is a fact.